Now, I mentioned some statistics, and I said they were unusual. What's unusual about those statistics? In fact, what's unexpected about the African American community, for instance, giving billions of dollars, millions of dollars in donations?
Well, just a slight update, if I may.
Sure.
To those statistics. Actually, Kellogg, first let me say this is not unusual. It's just that most people don't know about it. I mean, African and African American giving are part of the very foundation of this country. And at the backdrop of every successful social movement in this country, from the abolition movement to the civil rights movement, and in Africa, the liberation movements. And so grassroots giving in particular is part of the very fabric and history of America. It's just that people do this in part out of socialization, out of a sense of responsibility, and they think of very wealthy people as philanthropists, the Rockefellers, the Ford, the grandma who's been giving to the NAACP her entire life doesn't necessarily think of herself as a philanthropist, although she certainly is engaged in a long tradition of giving. The updates to the statistics are that the Kellogg Foundation affirmed a long-standing research fact that African Americans give at high levels, but are also the most philanthropic ethnic group in the country in terms of giving a higher proportion of their income to a variety of charitable causes in this country and outside of it. The figure is $12 billion for African Americans in 2011.
That's amazing. When you think of poor communities, you might even think that there might not even be that much money in the community. Is that a figure that might shock you, Eileen?
I think it actually does shock me a little bit. I think it's very exciting. What I'm involved with is a different way of giving back, where 40 or 50% of the men and women that I work with give back to their community by volunteering. And so in that way, they are rebuilding their dignity, which is helping them out of their homeless recovery, because they want to be part of it.
Okay, so we'll get to that. In Augusta, it was mentioned that billions of dollars are given by Africans to their hometowns. Is that their hometowns back in Africa?
It's probably specifically to their family members. So giving and mutual support is a very deep-rooted value in most African communities. And from the perspective of the Africans in diaspora, me being an example, almost everyone that I know of has in their budget some money they take back home every month. So basically, we support our families back home, in their livelihood.
Given the cost of living here, how is that affordable?
I don't think we even think about it. So basically, to us, it's not any different from me going to the grocery store. We just have to include it in our budget. If you look at traditionally, there are no social security benefits in something somewhere like Ghana, so there is retirement for people who work, but you have some people who have parents who didn't quote unquote work in an official way. So your children are basically part of your social security.
So is this something declared on your income tax as a donation?
Actually, we don't.
Yeah, most Africans don't. All that money they're giving, they're not getting tax write-offs for. And if I will say, it's a huge financial burden.
It is.
I would think so.
Our research shows that people are giving 20 to 60% of their monthly income away. And it's not only the families, they're sponsoring schools in their hometowns and providing healthcare services. Those are the two primary areas. And it's not just overseas. I mean, Augusta's on our advisory committee in the Bay Area and is president of an organization of Ghanaians in the Silicon Valley who sponsor a nonprofit right here in Silicon Valley every single year. Now, we're the fortunate beneficiary. This year on August 17th, we're doing an African Dream Summer Ball to kick off Black Philanthropy Month, which is something that AWDF USA founded but partners across the country are taken to a whole nother level.
Okay, we'll talk about that whole nother level, but we also have Valeda in this conversation. So Valeda, can you hear us? Oh, you can. Well, I hope they can get the volume up a little bit louder on your phone so we can hear you. You wrote a book, Giving Back. What prompted your writing that book?
Well, it was the fact that the prevailing stories about philanthropy often exclude the very stories your guests have just begun talking about. And feeling that being a part of the community and being aware of that generosity, wanted to lift up those stories and share it with the broader community and create a sense of pride within Black communities.
So what did you find out? What jumped out at you as you were writing the book that we might not think of?
Well, one of the things that maybe people aren't aware is just how wide a gap there is in the language of institutional philanthropy and even the word philanthropy and the giving that happens in Black communities. Oftentimes, as was mentioned earlier, people don't see their giving and their generosity as being philanthropy. And the word philanthropy is attributed to individuals outside the African American community. And I think it's important that we embrace that term and celebrate all of its forms as far as volunteerism, as was mentioned earlier, as well as monetary gifts and all the ways that people can be generous.
So when we think of ethnic communities like the African American community, we think of them perhaps as recipients of grants, more as recipients perhaps, rather than those who are making donations.
Correct.
And so I won't say how did we get that way, but are they more recipients than donors, or what would you say?
I'm not quite sure because I don't know the numbers, but all I know is that when you ask your first question, what was unusual? What is unusual is that people don't know that we actually give. And you know, Valeda just said that the same thing, that to your typical African or African American, given it's so natural to us, we don't think of that as philanthropy. It's just something that we do.
It just so happens, it seems that the community, the outside community, may not see that as philanthropy either.
Well, what's important about all the statistics you started with and the research that I and others do, and this research has been happening since the 1980s, the absolute social statistical fact is that African Americans are the most philanthropic ethnic group in the United States.
Did you know that?
Well, it's my field.
Well, I was asking that.
But,
I was asking that of Eileen.
But I mean, I'm going to say in Africa, there have been studies done in the Republic of South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And in those countries that had settler colonialism, indigenous African people are about 4 times more philanthropic than the wealthiest people of European heritage in their country. So it's almost, the international rule is almost, that's emerging from this research, is the poorer you are, the more philanthropic.
And it makes me wonder, if you're going to get wealthy, you get wealthy by holding on to your money, not by giving it away.
The wealthiest groups, the research shows, give a much smaller percentage of their income.
So would one then say, perhaps instead of giving so much money away, these groups might be better served if they held on to more of their money?
It all depends on what you mean about wealthy. What I see in a team of formerly homeless men and women who have had absolutely nothing now form together to form a community here in the Silicon Valley and support each other night and day with meals and housing, and it's a team that together is trying to bring themselves out of poverty. And so there's not a lot of It's not difficult to join the team. There's no judgment. There's not even an application process. It's just, do you want to work hard to change your life, and do you want to help others and be part of this magical team? And 40 or 50% of our team is African American, and those are the ones that are given more back, is what I see.
Well, it just occurred to me as we talk about this that when you don't have anything, you understand what it means not to have anything, which means as soon as you get something, you're more understanding of the plight of the person without, so you might be more willing to give.
Right, so you've been there, right?
Yes.
So you understand
Yes.
it. But from another perspective, the word abundance is very, very important. So if you asked, why don't instead of giving the money away, why don't we keep it? I think for someone's frame of mind, thinking that I may not have what somebody else might consider a whole lot of money, but if I think that I have enough to give, and you have a lot of people in the community thinking that we have enough to give, that in itself forms a very healthy basis for abundance. And they are more likely to get more money that way, from thinking that way, than thinking that I don't have enough to give, so I'm going to hold on to what I have.
Well, it occurs to me that those people who think they have enough to give, the larger society might think those are the people on welfare.
That's right.
And so rather than giving their money, they could keep that money and do without the welfare.
Well,
Do you understand that?
Well, I want to get Valeda into this, and
Yes,
I'm
I
just
was-
not a big fan of these. I hear what you're saying about what everyday people might think, but it's really important to recognize that philanthropy is giving. In the Black church, we call it time, talent, and treasure. It's not just about giving money. I think that's one of the things that Eileen is saying. And certainly that is a way of honoring the gifts that every individual can contribute to their community.
Now, I
however
can
they
understand
define
that, and we're going to get Valeda in this, but if you talk about billions of dollars, you're talking about it in terms of money.
Well, you are, but that's only one statistic, an indicator. There's other research that monetizes volunteerism.
Okay,
And
Valeda,
converts those
where are
in-kind
you?
contributions. And so part of what Black Philanthropy Month is about, and why we wanted to create it as a global recognition, is to say giving of time, talent, and treasure is the backbone of our successful social movements, that you don't have to have money to give. And it's
Correct.
part of our, it's an economy of giving, it is a culture of giving, it is an ethic of giving that keeps our community strong through hard times and supports the broader community, because we are giving to ourselves and others.